What happens when my quest for peaceful solitude turns into an all-out water war with the neighborhood's most entitled resident? Buckle up, because the chaos is just beginning. The day the alarm arrived was like Christmas morning for me, albeit a Christmas filled with potential chaos. It came bundled with a hefty instruction manual that seemed lost on my excitement. Upon unboxing, I felt like a kid with a new toy, but more of a mad scientist preparing for glorious chaos. I set up the military-grade motion detector by strategically placing it near the side gate, the weakest link in my fortress of solitude. Jake, ever the practical joker, stood beside me, grinning from ear to ear while offering unsolicited commentary. "Dude, the next time Karen steps a foot in your yard, it'll be like a scene from War of the Worlds," he exclaimed, and I couldn't help but chuckle at the visual of Karen running in a frenzy, her fluffy sarong fluttering like crazy. Activation was a nerve-wracking moment. I pressed the button with trembling fingers, and the system blinked to life with an ominous red glow. "We are go for launch," I yelled dramatically, drawing curious glances from indeed no one. But I felt like the commander of a top-secret operation against entitled water bandits. The siren was nearly deafening, and I couldn't help but think I might have just declared war on the neighborhood's swimming habits. However, the vision of Karen's startled face, blasting straight from her cheerful splashes back to reality, was too satisfying to ignore. "What would you do if we catch Karen in the act?" Jake asked mischievously. "I'll let you brave the front lines first," I replied with a bit of bravado, and we both laughed at the absurdity of it all. A week passed with no sight of my bikini-clad nemesis. I patrolled my backyard like a lion sizing up the savannah, anxiously waiting for the day Karen would descend on my oasis. Each day I watered my garden, trimmed the hedges, and read the latest bestseller in my outdoor lounge, building up an odd sense of anticipation, like I was waiting for a meteor shower or something. Jake kept reminding me to remain vigilant, claiming, "The longer Karen stays away, the bigger her appetite for mischief grows." It made sense, though my hopes began floundering. Maybe she had finally backed off after the backlash of my surveillance setup? Then, on an ordinary Thursday, it happened. I was lounging in my chair, sipping iced lemonade, when I heard it, a splash unmistakably echoing from my pool. My heart raced like I was a game show contestant about to hit the buzzer. The thrill was unbearable. Dashing up and peering through the fence, my eyes widened like saucers at the sight. Karen was indeed back, front and center, her fluorescent swimsuit a beacon of entitled defiance. Like an overinflated beach ball, she floated, blissfully unaware of the turmoil she'd reignited within me. "Jake, get on standby," I hissed, and he popped up from behind the hedge, his face lighting up with excitement. My hands jittered as they hovered over the button. In a moment of assurance, I slammed my finger down, triggering a cacophony of sirens and flashing lights. The sound was alien yet perfectly satisfying, a wild symphony of blaring chaos. The moment was magical. In my mind, it was like firing the starting gun at a race, and the sheer terror on Karen's face was the gold medal I sought. "What in the world?" she shouted, jettisoning off her floaty as if it was venomous, splashing water everywhere. Tears of laughter threatened to spill as I reveled in the scene, Jake doubling over with infectious hilarity. Karen's majestic dive from the pool was something I wish I could freeze frame and hang on my wall. With flailing arms and that huge burst of frothy water in her wake, she tumbled like an oversized fish out of its tank, scrambling towards the safety of my dry lawn. The expression that overcame her features, a mixture of horror and disbelief, was truly priceless. "Ethan, how could you?" she screeched, her indignation only fueling my laughter further. "I told you, it's a private pool," I yelled back, trying to contain my mirth and stifled by half-muffled giggles. Would she finally take the hint, or was this the beginning of a new chapter in our laughably absurd feud? As the sirens blared, and Karen floundered in outrage, I realized I might have set off fireworks in my own backyard. Was this the day I won back my peace? Or had I just declared war on my own sanity while infuriating a neighborhood titan of entitlement? With Jake still doubled over, howling in laughter beside me, I couldn't have plotted a better scheme if I tried. All I knew was, the saga of Karen versus Ethan was far from over, and I had a front-row seat to the fabulous chaos. Did I just need to start prepping for Phase 2 of my defense mechanism? As I watched Karen scramble like a cat caught in a shower, I couldn't help but feel an electric surge of triumph. The sirens were still blaring, casting harsh red lights over the lawn, as if I had truly crossed into a new territory, occupied by the adrenaline high of rebellious victory. It struck me in that moment that this wasn't merely about reclaiming my pool. It was my comedic vendetta against an unstoppable force, an entitled whirlwind with the fanciest of swimwear. Jake, finally recovering from his laughter, clutched his sides and stretched his arms upwards, mockingly cheering, "Victory for Ethan, king of the pool." His words fueled my laughter further, puncturing the tension that had built up over the weeks and transforming it into a shared joy of absurdity. Maybe there was magic in silliness, especially when one's personal space was being invaded by the neighborhood's reigning diva of swim. The next act of this bizarre saga came quicker than expected. Just as I was starting to savor the victory squeals echoing through the backyard, I noticed Karen's unmistakable glint of determination returning. As she stood dripping before me, arms crossed in a pose that would impress even the most seasoned game show host, my heart raced. "You think this is over?" she quipped with the confidence only someone who has rediscovered their sense of entitlement could muster. I leaned against the fence, a grin plastered on my face, saying, "You know, it's actually just warming up. Ready for round 2 of the splash zone?" I couldn't contain my wit. The look on her face soured, yet she remained a real-life caricature of defiance. It was unreal how she fed off of this madness, as if each ridiculous encounter only fortified her resolve. "Wait a second." Jake leaned in, eyes sparkling with possibilities. "What if you turn this into a full-blown production? Movie night, Ethan versus Karen, the pool wars." His laughter echoed through the backyard as the thought took hold. Immediately, my mind began racing toward outrageous ideas. I could add dramatic music, featuring everything from orchestral swells during her dunk to comical sound effects whenever she launched herself out of the water like a startled dolphin. Yes, we could even throw in slow-motion replays of her surprise jumps, I shouted, enthusiasm washing over me like a refreshing pool dip. The absurdity of it all evolved into something almost whimsical as our comedic imagination painted vivid, hilariously exaggerated scenarios of the ongoing saga, while the real confrontation simmered right before us. Somehow, we were staging an opera of water, with soundtracks of laughter echoing louder than ever. With every huff and puff that escaped Karen's lips like she was a dragon times 10, I suddenly saw things from her overcooked perspective for a split second. Here she was, thrust into a chaotic showdown while trying to take a relaxing swim in my pool. Did she believe that unfurling her sarong and punctuating my perfectly serene world was a proper form of social interaction? Probably. And all I could think about was how ridiculous it was that I had to contend with a woman armed with a complex that put the Dare to Swim campaign to shame. "You think you can set up this ridiculous system and scare me away?" she barked, the fight in her eyes sparking like live wires. "Watch me splash back harder." At this point, I realized my delightful antics were not just a serious campaign against unauthorized pool access, but also a vessel for comedic breakouts. Oh, how it felt so gloriously triumphant. My vision of Karen flailing, water exploding in slow motion, and her dazzling exclamations of outrage became richer and more vivid like an epic movie scene. Okay. I held up my hands defensively and snorted, "I surrender." But deep down, the little devil inside whispered I wouldn't back down that easily. With wild ideas whirling in my mind like confetti, what if I rigged an even bigger surprise next time Karen rolled out her cosmic inflatable flamingo and commandeered my pool? What if I integrated a cunning array of sprinklers, all aimed at creating a water slide of chaos? Perhaps I could lay low for a while. After all, the anticipation only heightens a showdown, and what fun is an instant victory without the thrill of the chase? As Karen stared between an unyielding glare and a certain bewilderment, the potential for retaliation danced in her eyes. She couldn't possibly expect me to let her get away with this fascinating comedy of errors. The next act of this was about to play out on my terms. I was revamping my approach, All I needed was a little more creativity combined with my technological advantage. Who knew a zany neighborhood feud could become such an outbreak of inspirations? Maybe my peaceful garden could bear fruit from the bizarre seed of rivalry that had sprouted in my once tranquil life. Was it time to accept the absurdity of it all and take my pool defenses to a whole new level? I could almost taste the next round of hilarity brewing just beneath the surface, as I stood there with a grin plastered across my face, reveling in my little victory. Karen's dramatic flair began to shift towards a renaissance of indignation. I leaned over the fence, ready to bask in the moment, soaking in the absurdity of it all as Karen, the self-proclaimed queen of my backyard, unleashed a tirade that should have made even the most seasoned soap opera star cringe. "You think this is funny?" she bellowed, her voice reaching a pitch that was eerily reminiscent of a banshee's wail. "You'll pay for this, Ethan Miller. This isn't over." The intensity of her indignation could have fueled a small town's worth of gossip, and I couldn't help but admire her unwavering confidence in her capacity to be utterly outrageous. My neighbors snickered behind their hands, clearly entertained. Was I really going to let her march in and dictate the terms of engagement? Absolutely not. In that moment, a light bulb flickered on above my head, illuminating the myriad of possibilities blooming within my imagination. What if I could prepare a seismic response to her looming sense of entitlement? Stepping back to consider my options, I envisioned a glorious poolside battleground, the scene of epic showdowns and waterlogged feuds that would be the talk of the block. I could engineer a series of elaborate water traps. Sprinklers? Just the start. I pictured a whimsical garden of mischievous fun, a wonderfully chaotic splash zone where Karen's every attempted swim would be met with whimsical water blasts and inflatable obstacles, transforming an ordinary pool into the fabled lands of comedy and mischief. It was time to bring on the creativity, the laughter, and the joy of revenge, fueled by absurdity. My heart raced as I declared to Jake, "This is going to be the most elaborate pool defense ever." Jake, a playful conspirator in the making, burst into laughter, his infectious enthusiasm spurring me on. Imagine the look on her face when she realizes your pool's become a full-blown water park. You could have theme days, slippery Sundays, or wet and wild Wednesdays. His excitement ignited a spark in my chest, and I couldn't help but chuckle at the sheer ridiculousness of the idea. Karen, fumbling through the water, drenched and determined to reclaim her natural habitat, would become the star of our neighborhood drama, an absolute comedic gem in a slapstick routine that would echo through sunny afternoons and into laughter-filled evenings. Okay, I exclaimed, fully embracing the hilarity of it all. Let's plot and scheme. We're morphing my backyard into the ultimate stage of water warfare. It was as if a strange alliance had formed. The escapades of my newest rival had knit the community together in ways I never could have anticipated, all in the spirit of humor. The next week unfolded with a flurry of imagination and laughter. Armed with garden hoses, inflatable flamingos, and a dizzying array of pool toys, I set forth to transform my backyard into Fort Ethan, a fortress designed to thwart the relentless tide of Karen's entitlement. Each evening, Jake and I would brainstorm new defenses while sampling a variety of snacks. We truly had turned this into a culinary masterminding session. I fashioned sprinklers to shoot water in every direction, set up inflatable obstacles, and stacked lounge chairs like miniature walls of water defense. It's like building a great wall around my artistic sanctuary, I gleefully declared, reveling in my inner architect. My yard was blooming into a whimsical blend of childish glee and serious determination, a hodgepodge of ingenious designs that could rival Disney's finest attractions. As I executed the final tweaks to my master plan, I glanced over the fence to gauge Karen's response. Lo and behold, there she stood, arms crossed, giving me the sort of glare that would wither even the toughest daisies. She was clearly contemplating how she would approach her inevitable splashdown, eyes scanning the territory I had claimed like a modern-day Aquaman. Perhaps she believed she could still intimidate me with that frosty gaze, a hate-filled force of nature ready to reclaim her rightful throne by my pool. The air was electric, full of anticipation as I imagined her making a glorious entrance into the chaotic wonderland I'd built. Unbeknownst to her, however, the game had changed dramatically. I was not just defending my pool, but setting the stage for a comedy that would ring out through the ages. The day of reckoning arrived at last. My heart pounded with both nervous energy and excitement as I prepped for a showdown that promised everything from cannonballs to comedic commentary. I could see Karen on her front porch, practically vibrating with unspent energy, ready to reclaim what she deemed hers. Jake leaned against the fence, barely containing his laughter, and added, "This is it. Feel the tension, man." I took a deep breath, channeling my inner warrior and giggle producer, fully ready to engage in a duel designed solely for the absurd. "Let the games begin," I shouted, ready to initiate the next act of this spectacle. But as I prepared my poolside MC introduction, I wondered, how far was I willing to take this comedic chaos? Would she join in the fun, or would I meet her fiercely dramatic retaliation head-on? With every moment that passed, I could feel the comedic tide turning, and I prepared myself for the hilarity of it all to come. What lay ahead for us would be epic, an unforgettable clash of absurd characters, shining lights, and laughter that might just explode through our peaceful neighborhood. As I adjusted the final inflatable flamingo, which I had dubbed Sir Waddleworth, I couldn't shake the sense of impending excitement. The neighborhood felt charged, like the calm before a summer storm. Jake stood by, eyes gleaming with anticipation, and I could swear he was measuring up our theatrics for prime viewing. "You know," he mused, a mischievous grin creeping onto his face, "if Karen was a cartoon, she'd be the villain who trips over her own cape as she storms the fortress." I couldn't help but chuckle. It was too perfect. Moments later, I spotted Karen through my kitchen window, marching toward my backyard like she was performing a royal inspection. Her determined strides told me she meant business and wasn't about to let some inflatable turkeys act as bouncers to her sacred swimming ground. The stage was set, and the curtain was on the verge of rising as waves of chuckles bounced off the picket fences of our suburb. Preparing for the showdown felt like gearing up for a championship fight. My trusty karaoke machine, strategically placed near the pool where it could be heard in every corner of the backyard, was ready to play the theme music of my choosing, Eye of the Tiger. I couldn't help but smirk at the irony. Ethan Miller, the peaceful gardener turned pool gladiator. I felt like I should have put on a cape, maybe a pool defender cape, and called myself Captain Chlorine. Jake was hilariously reenacting my potential wrestling intro, arms up, flexing like a dramatic action star, when, all of a sudden, the outdoor tranquility was shattered by Karen's booming voice. "Ethan," she called, venom tinged with desperation, "I know what you're up to. You can't keep me out of my pool." I couldn't contain my laughter. With her hands on her hips, she resembled a sitcom character who just caught her neighbors plotting against her, rather than a valid contender for any aquatic battle I could conjure. Who knew subtlety was a trait lost on her? Now, if I thought her demeanor was colorful before, it truly transformed when Karen encountered my whimsical fortifications. As she reached the edge of the pool area, her expression morphed from annoyance to utter disbelief, as if she had just stepped into an alternate reality filled with failed Pinterest projects and inflatable chickens. Giddy laughter escaped me as she took stock of the sprinklers poised to erupt and the floats positioned like sea monsters ready to rise. "What in the world is all this?" she yelled, almost choking on her assertiveness. Jake slipped into a mock English accent, declaring, "Welcome to the royal splash zone, dear Karen. Careful, or ye might just get drenched." My laughter echoed, and it felt wonderful to have someone outside of my own mind finding pure joy in the absurdity of it all. I knew that if I went down, I was going down in a blaze of theatrical glory. With Karen confounded, and my pocket of allies cheering from the sidelines, I was feeling pretty invincible. Yet, I knew I had to keep the momentum going. "Karen," I bellowed, stifling a chuckle, "why don't we make this a bit more sporting? Only those who dive through the sprinklers get to swim." A mad gleam ignited in her eyes, and despite the ridiculousness of her preposterous nature, I sensed she was contemplating the challenge. The air was thick with laughter and a touch of trepidation. "Oh, you think I'm afraid of a few sprinklers?" she retorted, taking a water-soaked stride toward my makeshift territory. "Bring it on." With that, she charged forward as if she were a gladiator wielding a sword, while my friends and I erupted into applause. The riotous tension created an electric atmosphere, charged with anticipation and poised for a battle that would become legend. Before any soaking began, I cranked up the music and let the theme of our backyard bonanza take over, echoing through the neighborhood where curious onlookers gathered to witness the spectacle. The sprinklers exploded into action, shooting arcs of water that sparkled in the sunlight, and for a brief second, time stood still. I could practically feel the eyes of the neighborhood upon us, watching to see if the grand finale would deliver. Karen took a flying leap, focusing on the water fountain challenge ahead of her. My laughter erupted as she missed her jump, landing firmly on the slippery inflatable shark I had set up earlier. With a shriek reminiscent of a cartoon character, she flopped sideways with a splash and popped up, completely drenched, her serenely stern expression utterly obliterated. Her shriek was music to my ears, a triumphant reminder that entitlement doesn't always win against absurdity and a colorful imagination. The resounding laughter from my friends and neighbors mingled into a chorus of merriment, undoubtedly echoing through the annals of our neighborhood history. It was a hilarious climax to what had previously felt like a never-ending tug-of-war between entitlement and humor. Karen, perhaps realizing her bluster didn't amount to much in a realm filled with water balloons and inflatable unicorns, finally joined the hilarity of the moment. A look of both disbelief and amusement doused her initially fierce stance. "Fine," she shouted, knocking on the inflatable flamingo like it was a door to negotiation. "I'll take a dive if that means I can splash about." The audience erupted into cheers, witnessing the most unexpected plot twist in our ongoing feud. Karen was ready to embrace the chaotic beauty of community play, swapping her authoritative tone for camaraderie, at least for the day. As the laughter grew louder and Karen succumbed to the joy of the situation, I couldn't help but feel a wave of satisfaction wash over me. Moments like this reminded me why I loved my unassuming neighborhood. We were no longer enemies in a mundane dispute, but comrades rooting for each other's amusement amid laughter and splashes. Perhaps this strange episode would lead to an utterly unpredictable friendship, or at least a shared pool of laughter for summers to come. And just like that, amidst the chaos of silliness and soaked swimwear, I couldn't help but wonder if Karen was finally inspiring changes in how we operated as neighbors. Who knew what the future held? There was a possibility that we'd dive into deeper waters, both literally and figuratively. The aftermath felt oddly celebratory. I was half wet from laughter and entirely victorious as I watched Karen adjust her now soggy sarong while surveying the chaotic scene. She looked like a ruffled duck, trying to reclaim her dignity among a flotilla of inflatable animals. Jake was on the ground, clutching his stomach, and I knew I was too. We were a pod of giggles trying to swim our way out of a tidal wave of humor. "So, Karen," I called over the delightful remnants of our aquatic brawl, "are you ready to surrender to the power of community pool therapy? Or are you going to keep floating on that delusion of entitlement?" With the battle now over, I couldn't stop myself from being cheeky. The laughter thickened in the air like the scent of summer barbecue drifting beneath the sun. "Considering I'm now part mermaid," Karen grumbled, but a cheeky smile broke through her stern facade as she approached the edge of the pool. "I suppose I can negotiate a compromise, or at least a dry towel until my next swim." In a surprising turn of events, a sense of camaraderie began bubbling up between us. I found solutions often came in the form of laughter. Who knew an unexpected water fight could turn a neighborhood feud into a light-hearted truce? My heart swelled as we joined the chorus of neighbors, brainstorming how our next meeting could lead to even more entertaining adventures. Was this a new chapter of neighborly rapport beginning to flood the pages of our suburban saga? Later that evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting all of us in shades of purple and orange, Jake and I kicked back by the pool with our neighborly audience, sipping lemonade and sharing the story of the ridiculous day. I swung my legs in the water and soaked up the good vibes, while exchanging exaggerated retellings of Karen's shark landing performance that would likely become local legend. Our heartiness chimed with each retake, fueled by the hushed gasps and laughter of new listeners shelling out nicknames for her performance. Karen the Shark Slayer being the resounding favorite that evening. There was something therapeutic in shared amusement, a sort of camaraderie that surpassed boundaries, a flavor of humanity in the form of quirky escapades. I couldn't resist leaning in for one last jab when Karen chimed in, "You think you enjoyed the show? Try being the main performer?" She nudged me gently, half dripping while comfortably lounging on a pool float. It felt surreal. sitting close to someone who had tested my every last nerve just days prior, but was now transformed into a beloved participant in the ongoing hilarity of our neighborhood. I could see what Jake meant about her being that cartoon villain. She had a knack for creating the most absurd situations. I chuckled at the idea of my story blending into a book of neighborhood folklore. A scroll passed through the backyard barbecue circuit, wrapped in layers of sunlight and laughter. As the nighttime fringe settled over us, and the stars began to twinkle above, I felt my phone buzz with notifications. I knew the neighborhood group chat was alive and kicking, likely filled with memes of Karen's situational flop, and images crafted from the day's drama featuring a flood of captions that couldn't help but radiate joy and rib-tickling humor. A sense of gratitude washed over me. It was invigorating to witness how collective laughter could build bridges where disputes simply resided, once pendulous in our daily dismay. The night we had was bound to linger, an affectionate reminder that what once divided us could be stitched together in laughter at the most ludicrous junctions. Wrapped in fresh camaraderie, I suddenly felt inspired to propose an annual neighborhood splash fest, as my mind was spinning with ideas faster than a roller coaster ride. I envisioned water balloon tosses, inflatable boat races that could rival any Olympic competition, and maybe even karaoke rounds, turning each summer into a vibrant burst of unity. "Let's make this a thing," I shouted with glee. "Who's joining the pool splash lyric brawl next summer?" The chorus of cheers swelled in agreement, even with Karen chiming in with her unexpected flair for over-the-top enthusiasm. "Count me in, just let me practice my majestic entries." As the laughter flowed like the last joyous splashes of water playfully darting out of the pool, I couldn't help but think about how spectacularly absurd it was that something as mundane as pool access had turned into a wild adventure bursting with a myriad of emotions, a journey laden with occasional annoyance, but ultimately overflowing with joy. I glanced around at my friends who rallied to defend my territory, and at Karen, now an unassuming partner in laughter, and knew that this peculiar neighborhood had transformed into a collective stage filled with quirky characters and laughable tales. And really, who could complain when a little bit of absurdity led to new friendships? After all, isn't bursting into laughter the best way to swim through life's turbulent waters?